What do we mean when we say we are created in the image of God? There are lots of misconceptions about it floating around. In yesterday's devotional, I suggested that part of the answer lies in the way image and likeness were used in the ancient world to describe physical representations, statues that kings would place around their realm to be a sort of physical representation of the king himself. According to the creation narratives in Genesis, human beings were created for much the same purpose. Humankind was created in the image of God and placed in the Garden of Eden to, quote, till it and keep it. This suggests that human beings are God's representatives on earth, exercising dominion and serving as faithful stewards of God's good creation. But is there more to it than that? Let's find out. Hello, I'm Stuart Baskin, pastor of First Presbyterian Church of Tyler, Texas, and this is your daily devotional for Thursday, May 16th, 2024. It has become fashionable in recent years to think that God created me and you personally, each one of us personally created by God. But that's not exactly what Scripture says. To be sure, there are passages that suggest God has known us since before our birth, but it is humankind as a whole that God created. So if we want to understand what it means to have been created in the image of God, we want to talk about what it means to be human. And of course, we can't know what it means to be human apart from the intrusion of sin. Whatever else we want to say about ourselves, we always need to remember that even though we were created in the image and likeness of God, that image has been, as the Scots Confession puts it, defaced. Defaced here does not necessarily mean destroyed, more like distorted, disfigured, marred, but still recognizably human. For much of the history of the church, theologians have talked about what it means to have been created in the image of God by pointing to a constellation of qualities which distinguish us from other creatures. The Scots Confession lists wisdom, lordship, justice, free will, and self-consciousness. The Westminster Confession puts it this way: after God had made all other creatures, he created man, male and female, with reasonable and immortal souls, endued with knowledge, righteousness, and true holiness after his own image, having the law of God written in their hearts and power to fulfill it, and yet under a possibility of transgression, being left to the liberty of their own will. In addition to these kinds of qualities, the Heidelberg Catechism talks about what we are created for. God created man good in his image, that is, in true righteousness and holiness, so that he might rightly know God his Creator, love him with his whole heart, and live with him in eternal blessedness, praising and glorifying him. What this all suggests is that to be created in the image of God is to have been endowed with certain qualities that reflect but do not equal the excellences of God. This points to a unique and special place that we have within the created order. We are higher than all other creatures, yet lower than God, higher even than angels, but not divine. In this in-between place, we have a special vocation to care for God's good creation. And yet, the reality of sin has affected our abilities, even those things that set us apart, so that we only ever fill our high calling imperfectly. Instead of treating creation with reverence, we often treat it as our own to do with as we please. Instead of treating creation as if we understood ourselves to be stewards, we treat it as our own personal property, which no one can tell us what to do with. John Calvin suggested that the qualities which make us human fulfill one more function. In the opening chapter of the Institutes of the Christian Religion, he writes, "For quite clearly, the mighty gifts with which we are endowed are hardly from ourselves. Indeed, our very being is nothing but subsistence in the one God. Then by these benefits, shed like dew from heaven upon us, we are led as by rivulets to the spring itself." For Calvin, the great qualities which make us human and separate us from the rest of creation should prompt us to ask where they came from and then point us to the God who created us. The problem is, the same sense that has defaced the image of God within us also turns us away from God and tricks us into believing we do not need God. It is a kind of self-deception that makes us think we are perfect as we are. But Paul reminds us that only in Jesus Christ do we see true humanity and what it really looks like. Paul writes, Christ is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation. So where does this all leave us? We're part of God's good creation, and we have a unique and special place within it. But at the same time, sin has intruded and has marred the image of God within us. Nevertheless, we still retain, even if imperfectly, the things that make us human, and we still maintain our high calling as stewards of God's good creation. All of which is pretty awesome once you think about it. When we return tomorrow, I want to spend a couple of days considering what it means to forgive. But for now, may God continue to bless you and keep you in all that you do this day and in all the days ahead.